Roland Mumford with Mumford.law. Today I checked my nose hairs, as yesterday I did a video and I caught after the fact that I had a couple nose hairs sticking out, and you guys gave me some grief in the comments. I was expecting it, but I was not going to redo that video. So I ordered on Amazon that Manscaped weed whacker, they call it, that nose hair trimmer. So we had a little bit of fun with that yesterday, and I can be gregarious and self-deprecating, but we had some fun with that. Anyways, today I'm doing a video about the use of restraint chairs by law enforcement departments. I came across a video about a sheriff in Georgia that has been convicted in federal court for civil rights violations involving the use of restraint chairs, placing people that were not being passively aggressive at all or even resisting while they were there in the jail, and they would just be placed into these restraint chairs for up to as many as 10 hours. There were several people who had their civil rights violated by this particular sheriff, and we're going to talk about that. The reason that this came to mind for me was because years ago I represented a very young autistic child who had a manifestation, and a local sheriff's department, Sumner County Sheriff, years ago, they placed that little boy who was autistic in a restraint chair, and something that I never forgot about. Well, anyways, I'm doing a piece on this video is about what is the proper use of restraint chairs and what are the improper uses. And we're going to talk about this particular sheriff in Georgia. I'm going to play some news reports. One kind of talking about how they first learned about it through surveillance camera video there in the jail. And then we're going to play the news video about his conviction. And then a third follow-up video talking about the civil rights violation. Now, the sheriff that I'm referring to is Victor Hill. He's the former Clayton County Sheriff. He handcuffed a man to a restraint chair, but it was actually several people. So this involves a former Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill violating prisoners' rights. There was a video that came out showing how he had approached one gentleman and told him that he was not be allowed in the county, asking him why he was in the county. And he literally told the guy that the democracy and freedom didn't apply in his county. In the video that we're about to play, Hill is seen walking into a holding cell to speak with the man arrested. He asked the man what was he doing in Clayton County. And is this a democracy, the guy asked? And is this the United States? That's what this handcuffed gentleman said to Hill. Hill responded, "No, it's not in my county." As the video goes on, the handcuffed man is seen complying with deputy's orders, respectfully calling him sir as he asks about his rights. He asks, "Am I entitled to a fair and speedy trial?" the man asks. And then you can hear the sheriff say, "Roll that chair around here. Roll that chair around here. You stay out of Clayton County. Do you understand me? You sound like a dummy." That's what he says in the video. Now, according to the county's jail policy, using a restraint chair is only allowed when someone is a threat to themselves or others. However, former inmates who testified in the federal criminal case said he commanded them to sit in the chair for up to 10 hours. Now, while Hill had claimed that he wasn't guilty, this video shows him ordering a handcuffed man who was not being resisting in any way and was challenging the sheriff about his freedom and his liberties, and this is how he was punished. We'll look at the news video where Hill is about to be sentenced on 6 counts of violating prisoners' rights inside the Clayton County Jail in Georgia. You can also hear the guy ask, "Sir, I'm going to ask you a third time," he said. And then the sheriff responded, "You ain't going to ask me jack. You are entitled to sit in this chair and get the hell out of my county and don't come back. That's what you're entitled to." Again, he said, "You sound like a dummy, Jack." Now, 7 former inmates testified against Hill, telling the jury they were scared and pain and forced to urinate on themselves because they were not allowed to use the restroom. And that's what this news report talks about. He says, "Now sit there and see if you can get some damn sense in your head." That's something else that you'll see in the video. The federal prosecutors had recommended, according to this news report by 11 Alive in Atlanta, that they recommended a 46-month sentence, and Hill would initially face 70 to 87 months of prison, but he objected to the severity of the offenses, the document had said. Now, so the federal government, after consideration, is recommending a sentence of 46 months. We'll do the news report about the sentence and show what the court actually sentenced him to. And then, as I said, we'll discuss the civil lawsuit. Now, we'll also, at the end of the news reports, I'm going to kind of go into detail about the proper use of civil restraint chairs And we'll talk specifically about the civil rights lawsuit. And I'm going to throw up the civil rights lawsuit up on the screen, and we'll go through the counts because they allege cruel and unusual punishment. It's kind of not a rare case, but it's not your typical false arrest, Fourth Amendment, or malicious prosecution or excessive force case. And we're going to look at the lawsuit and look at the legal averments and look at the counts. And that'll be at the end. See you on the other side.
Keep going in Clayton County that day.
It's a democracy, sir. It's the United States.
No, it's not in my county.
All new tonight at 6, we have obtained the video that prompted a federal jury to convict former Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill. This comes just days before Hill is set to be sentenced in federal court.
As our Caitlin Ross reports, the video was secretly recorded inside the sheriff's office and used by federal authorities during his trial, and she has the exclusive details tonight.
Hill is about to be sentenced on 6 counts of violating the rights of prisoners inside the Clayton County Jail. The video is 6 minutes long and shows the former sheriff's face as he orders deputies to strap a man down in a restraint chair just minutes after he was arrested. We've blurred that man's face because he's not charged with a crime. Room gets quiet as former Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill walks into a holding cell to confront a prisoner.
It's a democracy, sir. It's the United States.
No, it's not in my county.
The video shows the man handcuffed and complying with deputies' orders, calling the sheriff sir as he asks about his rights.
Roll that chair around me. Roll that chair around me. You stay out of Clayton County. You understand me?
Yes, sir.
You sound like a nerd.
Clayton County jail policy allows the use of a restraint chair only when the prisoner is a threat to themselves or others. But former prisoners testified that Victor Hill commanded that they sat in the chair for up to 10 hours. While Hill claims he's not guilty, this video shows him order the inmate to be strapped into the chair.
It's your third time. Bring in speedy trial.
You're entitled to sit in this chair, and you're entitled to get the hell out of my county and don't come back. That's what you're entitled to. You sound like a damn jack.
7 former inmates testified against Hill, telling the jury they were scared, in pain, and forced to urinate on themselves because they were not allowed to use the bathroom. The jury ultimately found Hill guilty of violating 6 inmates' rights, including this man who testified at trial.
Sit there and see if you can get some damn sense in your head.
Victor Hill's sentencing is at the discretion of the judge. He faces anywhere from 2 years to 15 years in federal prison. Hill's attorneys say they plan to appeal the verdict.
Now, this sheriff in this next video is going to show how he was charged with civil rights violations by the U.S. attorney. That news report is going to discuss that. And it's going to talk about trial testimony given by some of the gentlemen that were put in the restraint chairs and the details of this really torture of this treatment. And then immediately after that, the U.S. attorney will come out in this video and announce the conviction of the sheriff, which was obviously after the trial. And he gives a lot of details about the testimony and discusses about the upcoming sentencing.
Welcome back. A former detainee testified in federal court today about being strapped into a restraint chair inside the Clayton County Jail. Sheriff Victor Hill is on trial for civil rights violations. Channel 2's Audrey Washington's live outside the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta. This was some very graphic testimony, Audrey.
Right, and we also saw some graphic images inside court. Now, this was the first time we actually heard from a former jail detainee on the stand. He detailed his experiences at the jail and with the sheriff. The jail detainee who took the stand in the federal trial of Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill says he's still haunted by the alleged incident. Desmond Bailey told the court that after he was sent to the Clayton County Jail on a drug and gun possession arrest, Sheriff Victor Hill met with him. He testified that Hill asked, quote, "Who do you think you are? What are you doing in my jail?" Bailey went on to tell the court that Hill then yelled, quote, "You think you're a bad expletive." Bailey testified that Hill then directed his officers to put him in the restraint chair. He said, "Restraints since, correct?" Bailey answered, "Yes, ma'am." At one point, government attorneys asked Bailey, quote, "How did it feel to be in the chair?" Bailey answered, "It was horrible." I asked the defense attorneys about the use of the restraint chair.
Felt that he instituted something that would bring safety and peace and health to everybody in that environment.
And we also reached out to the prosecution, but we were told that they most likely would not comment on an ongoing trial. As for court, it is set to resume Monday morning. We're live here in downtown Atlanta. Audrey Washington, Channel 2 Action News.
Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Buchanan. I'm the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. I'm joined by Assistant United States Attorney Brett Hobson, special agents from the FBI Atlanta Division. Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill has been convicted by a federal jury on 6 counts of civil rights charges for ordering his employees to use excessive force against 6 pretrial detainees at the Clayton County Jail from 2019 to 2020. The evidence, witness testimony at trial showed that Hill ordered his employees to strap the detainees without any legal justification into a restraint chair and to keep them there for hours in violation of their constitutional rights. Witnesses testified that they sat in those chairs for hours, that many of them urinated on themselves and suffered injury. Hill deprived these detainees of their constitutional and lawful rights because the use of this force was unreasonable and it amounted to punishment. No person, whether a member of law enforcement or an elected official or otherwise, has the right or can assume the power to violate the constitutional rights of the citizens in their care. Mr. Hill will be sentenced in the upcoming months, and we'll have more to say at that time. Thank you.
Now, in this next video clip, this news report is going to go specifically into the details about the sheriff being sentenced to 18 months in jail, 6 years of supervisory probation or supervision. And then this news report has an interview of the whistleblower. It appears to be a female jailer or employee of the jail that had recorded one or more incidences that led to these charges in the video that is shown in this news report that we played a moment ago. So this is very interesting to listen to this whistleblower. She had apparently been demoted and retaliated against, and she would have had a claim under the Georgia Whistleblower Act for doing that. So let's take a look at this. This goes into some pretty good detail about the sentencing, but also, again, about the interview with the whistleblower.
A restraint chair is for somebody coming in that's physically harming themselves or other people. That's what the restraint chair is for, not because you have a bruised ego and you're upset.
New at 6, Only 11 Alive is speaking with a whistleblower who helped get former Sheriff Victor Hill convicted. Tonight, Hill is vowing to appeal that conviction after he was sentenced today to 18 months in federal prison for violating the civil rights of detainees.
Yeah, right now we're working to learn when Hill will turn himself over to authorities. Bobeth Yates starts off our team coverage for us tonight.
Well, tonight we're waiting to hear when Victor Hill will turn himself in. But we do know the former sheriff who ran Clayton County Jail will soon become an inmate himself. In October, a jury found Hill guilty of 6 of 7 counts for violating the constitutional rights of Clayton County Jail inmates. Today, U.S. District Judge Eleanor Ross sentenced him to 18 months in prison, followed by 6 years of supervised release and 100 hours of community service. Hill's attorney, Drew Findling, says the sentence is better than the 46 months recommended by prosecutors. And those on both sides, including a resident who was detained and strapped for hours to the restraining chair at the center of this case, are celebrating this as a win.
Some accountability is better than no accountability.
The judge coming down to 18 months and the things that she said was a clear recognition of the uniqueness of this case. This case is a case of first impression in the United States of America.
Now, despite the reduced sentence, Hill's attorney says they will be appealing this decision. They have 14 days to do so. In court, they did not mention when Hill has to turn himself into jail, but of course we'll update you when that information is made available. Bobeth Yates, 11 Alive News.
Now, in an exclusive interview, the star witness against former Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill is speaking out. After working for Clayton County, she tells our Caitlin Ross what she saw was just not right. That's why she claims she decided to record the sheriff on video. Speaking up came at a cost for this police officer. She told me an hour after she testified at the grand jury against former Sheriff Victor Hill, she was demoted and removed from all of her special team assignments. She struggled to find work in the field after she left the department, but still says she has no regrets.
How old are you? 50 years old.
This officer secretly hit record on her cell phone when former Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill came down to the jail to confront a prisoner, because she says she knew what would happen next.
Everybody was scared. So many people were scared. A lot of people were saying, look, I'm not going to testify. And so I'm like, well, somebody's got to stand up.
She wants to keep her identity secret because she testified against Victor Hill at trial. but says the public deserves to see what he did to people at the jail.
Roll that chair around you. Roll that chair around you. Stay out of Clayton County. You understand me?
Yes, sir.
You sound like a nerd.
It's upsetting. It's really degrading. It's everything that we should be against.
The use of a restraint chair is allowed at the Clayton County Jail for a limited time if the prisoner is a threat to themselves or others. She says this video proves that wasn't the case.
He wasn't combative. He wasn't fighting. He was respectable.
I'm gonna ask you a third time.
You ain't gonna ask me.
I'm entitled to a free and speedy trial.
You entitled to sit in this chair, and you're entitled to get the hell out of my county and don't come back. That's what you entitled to.
We live in a world where seeing is believing, hearing is believing.
At trial, the former sheriff pled not guilty, and his attorneys argued he didn't order the restraint chair's use. The jury saw the video and decided otherwise.
Sit there and see if you can get some damn sense in your head.
She did eventually find a department that saw value in her standing up for what was right. She's since moved up at that agency. She says of the guilty verdict, she thinks the jury got it right.
And we have covered this investigation from the very start. For a full breakdown of how we got here and what's next for the former sheriff, click on this story on 1111.
Now, during the criminal trial, apparently there was some drama with a juror who was acting awkward, showing signs of cognitive impairment, saying that the sheriff and a president were above the law or something to that effect. This is kind of an interesting part of the drama of this trial. Of course, we've discussed how he'd been sentenced, but let's take a look at this news report. This is really interesting and kind of enjoyable to watch.
Trial of Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill started deliberations over again today after a juror was released and replaced with an alternate. But the jury drama didn't end there.
No, there's a lot of drama today here at Savannah. Today, the foreperson says one juror believes the sheriff is above the law and that same person is not cooperating with the other jurors. But that person is still on the jury. 11 Alive's Doug Richards is live at the federal courthouse with more on that. Doug?
Yes, the foreperson in this case complained twice to the judge this afternoon about this one particular juror who appears to be preventing the preventing the jury panel from reaching a unanimous verdict against former Clayton County Sheriff, suspended Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill. The forewoman of the federal jury weighing the guilt or innocence of Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill sent a note to U.S. District Judge Eleanor Ross complaining that one of the jurors would not acknowledge the law, didn't understand the court's instructions, appears to show the beginning of cognitive impairment, and claimed that the U.S. president and the sheriff are above the law. Suspended Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill is accused of violating the constitutional rights of 7 Clayton County jail inmates by forcing them into restraint chairs for hours with little provocation. Hill told the jury he did it to maintain order in the jail. In court, the juror, a white man who appeared to be in his 60s or older, denied that he was ignoring or disregarding the law. I've had jurors screaming at me. I've had people raising their voices, describing me as inarticulate or crazy, but I try to measure the consequences of every word I use, the juror told the court. To convict Hill, all 12 jurors would need to agree unanimously. Former prosecutor Robert James told us Monday, jurors come into cases with their own frames of reference.
It's a compare and contrast, right? Jurors aren't robots. They're human beings. They come with their own, prejudice and bias and preconceived notions about who's credible and who's not and what credible looks like.
After questioning the juror, Hill's defense team asked Judge Ross to allow the juror to stay on the jury panel. The judge agreed. The defense team did not celebrate afterward, but one would not blame them if they had. Live at Federal Court, Doug Richards, 11 Alive News.
Absolutely, and the beat goes on. Thanks a lot. We appreciate that, Doug. Stay with 11 Alive on air and online for the very sure to download the 11 Alive News app. It's free in the App Store.
So now that we've talked about the sheriff in Clayton County, we discussed the charges. He was convicted. He was sentenced. Now let's talk about the civil trial where the gentleman sued the sheriff for civil rights damages and a civil claim under Section 1983. Here's a news report that goes into more detail about that, and then we'll talk about the actual lawsuit and look at the complaint.
Exclusive today, a jury heard opening statements in a lawsuit against former Clayton County Sheriff Victor Hill. Channel 2 investigative reporter Mark Winnie is live now in downtown Atlanta. So, Mark, this case involves allegations about a man strapped into that restraint chair when Hill was sheriff.
George, justice can come in many forms, and former Sheriff Victor Hill faced one type, criminal case, a while back in federal court, but then there is the civil arena where lawsuits are brought, and we heard opening statements about one of those late this afternoon. We can't count how many times Victor Hill has been in a courtroom as a law enforcement officer who reached a pinnacle as Clayton County Sheriff, and now as a defendant in a federal lawsuit. A jury was seated this afternoon in the suit in which what happened to Glenn Howell when he was seated in a restraint chair and in the aftermath seemed to be key issues. We interviewed Howell in 2023.
When you got out of that chair, how big were your hands?
Size softballs. Howell said then Sheriff Hill interceded for one of Hill's deputies in appealing the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Howell's attorney, Darrell Scott, used the word torture in his opening statement and the phrase vigilante sheriff.
It's a civil suit, so it's about money damages, and that's what Mr. Howell is seeking.
Hill's civil attorney, Michael Hoffer, says many of the facts in the lawsuit came up in the federal civil rights criminal case in which former Sheriff Hill was convicted and for which he's done his time.
You don't dispute that Glenn Howell's civil rights were violated in that restraint chair.
That's been established by the criminal conviction.
But what do you say?
What we say is that what Sheriff Hill didn't do is cause damages to Mr. Howell, which is Sheriff Hill did not put his hands on Mr. Howell. He didn't tell anyone to be, and that the nurse who checked his restraints in the restraint chair, saw that they were properly applied, and also that Sheriff Hill is the first and only law enforcement official who has been arrested, tried, and convicted of a restraint chair, use of a restraint chair in the entire United States.
But that was affirmed by a federal appeals court.
That's correct.
I got the impression from openings that there will be some other issues besides the restraint chair. Document says Hill's conviction, quote, arose from his punishment of Howell and 5 other compliant, non-resistant detainees by leaving them in a restraint chair for hours at a time. Reporting live in downtown Atlanta, Mark Winnie, Channel 2 Action News.
Let's take a look at the federal lawsuit that was filed by Glenn Howell, again, versus Victor Hill, the former sheriff that we've been talking about. Now, this is an excessive force lawsuit in violation of a due process of the 14th Amendment clause. So that appears to be his sole claim. This is the first amended complaint for damages. I'm just going to scroll through this slowly because I know a lot of you sometimes represent yourselves in these 1983 cases, and you can go online and a lot of times use these lawsuits as templates to find your own lawsuit if you're having to represent yourself pro se. So obviously this is going through the venue and the jurisdiction. It's establishing the parties. Now here it's interesting to note that Victor Hill, he is being sued here. He should be being sued individually. I don't think he's being sued in his official capacity. Yes, he's only being sued in his individual capacity. It doesn't appear that there was a Monell claim here. If he had been sued in his official capacity, then that would have been, in essence, saying he's also suing the county that the sheriff's office was in. So this goes through the facts. It's too many pages to go through. So let's talk about the substantive allegations. It's count 1, excessive force in violation of the 14th Amendment due process clause to the United States Constitution enforced via 42 U.S.C. 1983. I am getting ready to file an excessive force case, pretty much similar to this, but it'll also be a Fourth Amendment unlawful seizure of a 13-year-old that had been thrown down to the ground by Officer Sasser down in Brunswick, Georgia. And we're getting ready to file this lawsuit, and the bulk of the claim is going to be an excessive force claim, as well as a Fourth Amendment detention, a false detention and false seizure. But the excessive force would go to how this officer had thrown down the 13-year-old that I represent. This, again, is about putting the gentleman in the restraint chair. And so it says that defendant ordered that an arrest warrant be sworn out against the plaintiff for harassing communications following a contentious phone call initiated by the defendant to the plaintiff's cell phone. Defendant then sent his heavily armed fugitive squad 2 counties over for 2 days in search of a plaintiff on a misdemeanor warrant. Upon surrendering himself as a misdemeanor pretrial detainee to the Clayton County Jail, plaintiff was personally visited by Sheriff Hill, who berated him, ordered him to the restraint chair, and then to a suicide cell, all without any rational justification related to a legitimate, non-punitive governmental purpose. Instead, Sheriff Hill acted out of revenge with the intent to punish plaintiff and in violation of clearly established law which prohibits the use of force against pretrial detainees for the purpose of punishment. And it talks about the case Bell versus Wolfish. That's a Supreme Court case in 1979. If you want to Google that, take a look at that. At no time during his incarceration did plaintiff make any statements, exhibit any behavior, or take any action that would indicate he was a threat to himself or others. Moreover, plaintiff was fully compliant and did as ordered during his entire incarceration. Defendant's restraint and use of force was wholly unnecessary, objectively unreasonable, and served no legitimate, non-punitive governmental purpose. Defendant acted with actual malice and with a specific intent to injure plaintiff. And defendant was acting under the color of law and is liable for damages arising from the punitive restraint and excessive force used against the plaintiff. They're asking for attorney's fees. They go into the damages. Talks about as a result of the defendant's conduct, plaintiff has incurred loss of liberty, shame, humiliation, anxiety, fear, and anger, along with physical and mental pain and suffering, and will continue to suffer into the future. He had medical specials of almost $5,500. All of defendant's actions complained of in this complaint showed actual malice, willful conduct, wantonness, oppression, or the entire want of care, which raises the presumption of conscious indifference to the consequences. His acts were taken to harm plaintiff and to deprive him of his constitutional rights. And they're asking for punitive damages, which I think they'll absolutely get. So I looked up also, they had filed a motion to dismiss, which is common in these 1983 cases, and they denied the qualified immunity that Hill was seeking. And then Hill appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the 11th Circuit affirmed the denial of the motion to dismiss. And now the case is set for jury trial. The jury trial date has been continued. That case has been going on for more than 4 years. I looked at the rule docket sheet. Well, listen, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please click like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.